Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Shila Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam class ki Jai. Go Premanande. Glories to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Welcome, dear devotees. Thank you for joining this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. I pray that I can speak something beneficial that these great saintly Vaishnavas can benefit from. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we're continuing to read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 10, and today we're starting the new chapter. So I'll go ahead and read the chapter summary, and it's a short one. And then today we're doing texts number 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3 don't have any purports, and then the fourth one has a short purport. But I think there's some very nice points we can cover in today's verses. Hare Krishna. So, chapter 10, the battle between the demigods and Vitrasura. As described in this chapter, after Indra obtained the body of Dadichi, a thunderbolt was prepared from Dadichi's bones, and a fight took place between Vitrasura and the demigods. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demigods approached Dadichi Muni and begged for his body. Dadichi Muni, just to hear from the demigods about the principles of religion, jokingly refused to relinquish his body, but for higher purposes, he thereafter agreed to give it up. For after death, the body is usually eaten by low animals, like dogs and jackals. Dadichi Muni first merged his gross body, made of 5 elements, into the original stock of 5 elements, and then engaged his soul at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, he gave up his gross body. With the help of Vishvakarma, the demigods then prepared a thunderbolt from Dadichi's bones. Armed with the thunderbolt weapon, they prepared themselves to fight and got up on the backs of elephants. At the end of Satya Yuga and the beginning of Treta Yuga, a great fight took place between the demigods and the asuras. Unable to tolerate the effulgence of the demigods, the asuras fled the battle, leaving Vitrasura, the commander-in-chief, to fight for himself. Vitrasura, however, seeing the demons fleeing, instructed them in the importance of fighting and dying in the battlefield. One who is victorious in battle gains material possessions, and one who dies. Excuse me. Yeah. I've got a frog in my throat. At the end of Satya Yuga and the beginning of Treta Yuga, a great fight took place between the demigods and the asuras. Thank you. Unable to tolerate the effulgence of the demigods, the asuras fled the battle, leaving Vitrasura, the commander-in-chief, to fight for himself. Vitrasura, however, seeing the demons fleeing, instructed them in the importance of fighting and dying on the battlefield. One who is victorious in battle gains material possessions, and one who dies in the battlefield attains a residence at once in the celestial heavens. In either way, the fighter benefits. Text 1. I'll recite the first 3 verses, then we can do the 4th verse together. Shri Badar Yaner Uvacha Indram Eva Samadhisya Bhagavan Visva Bhavana Pasyatam Anime Sanam Tatra Ivan Tardah Hari. Translation. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, after instructing Indra in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the cause of the cosmic manifestation, then and there disappeared from the presence of the onlooking demigods. Text 2. Tata Chito Devir Risir Atarvano Mahan Modamana Uva Chedam Prahasan Iva Bharata. O King Parikshat, following the Lord's instructions, the demigods approached Dadichi, the son of Atharva. He was very liberal, and when they begged him to give them his body, he at once partially agreed. However, just to hear religious instructions from them, he smiled and jokingly spoke as follows. Text 3. Api vrindaraka yuyam na janita saririnam samstayam yastvi adhir droho dusahas chaitana paha. O elevated demigods, at the time of death, severe unbearable pain takes away the consciousness of all living entities who have accepted material bodies. Don't you know about this pain? Text 4. Jijivisunam jivanam atma presta. Well, we can do it together. Okay, please repeat. Jijivisunam jivanam Atma presta ihepsita ka utsaheta tum datum bhiksa manaya visnave jiji Vishnu Jivanam Atma Presta Ihepsita Ka Utsaheta Tam Datum Bhiksamanaya Visnava Jiji Vishnum Jivanam Atma Presta Ihepsita Ka Utsaheta Tam Datum Bhiksamanaya Visnave. Please repeat.
Jiji Vishnu Nam Jivanam
Jiji Vishnu Jivanam Atma Presta Ihepsitaha Ka Utsaheta Tam Datum
Kshamaya Naya Vishnave
Bhiksamanaya Visnave. Jiji Vishnu Jivanam.
Atma Prashta Ipsitaha. Ka Utsaheta Tandatum. Vikshamanaya Vishnave.
Anybody else would like to recite?
Jiji Vishunam Jivanam
Jiji Vishnu Jivanam.
Atma Preshta Ihepsitaha
Atma Prastham Yapsaja.
Ya Utsaheta Tam Datum
Ka Utsaheta
Vikshamanaya Vishnave.
Viksamanaya Vishnave. Jiji Vishnum, aspiring to remain alive. Jivanam, of all living entities. Atma, the body. Presta, very dear. Iha, here. Ipsita, desired. Ka, who. Utsaheta, can bear. Tam, that body. Datum, to deliver. Bhiksamanaya, begging. Vishnave, even to Lord Vishnu. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the material world, every living entity is very much addicted to his material body. Struggling to keep his body forever, everyone tries to protect it by all means, even at the sacrifice of all his possessions. Therefore, who would be prepared to deliver his body to anyone, even if it were demanded by Lord Vishnu? Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is said, Atmanam Sarvato Rakset Tato Dharmam Tato Dhanam. One must protect his body by all means. Then he may protect his religious principles and thereafter his possessions. This is the natural desire of all living entities. No one wants to give up his body unless it is forcibly given away. Even though the demigods said that they were demanding the Richi's body for their benefit in accordance with the order of Lord Vishnu, Dadichi superficially refused to give them his body. Om Agyana Timarandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmitam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Nama Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindurevacha Patita Nama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Nama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing to read about Vitrasura, and of course, in this chapter, we'll read about this great battle that is taking place between Vitrasura and the demigods. Vitrasura, of course, is in charge, commander-in-chief of the Asura army, and of course, we'll continue to read, how amazingly huge and ghastly Vitrasura was. Earlier we read, that his mouth had started on the ground, and was so huge that it went way up into the sky. So a very, very ghastly demon. His teeth, there's descriptions given of his teeth and how he was, literally just trampling all the demigods. So very, very ferocious demon in one sense. But of course, we'll also learn and realize that, the inner desire of Vitrasura was to be killed so that he can be liberated. So a very, very great devotee in one sense. And of course, somehow the other, for the sake of pastime, he is in this role. And as we'll discuss, he is doing his duty as a Kshatriya. He has his duty, and so he's giving some instruction as well in the course of time. as this battle unfolds. We'll hear later how even when in this great battle that he was having with Lord Indra, at some point Lord Indra loses his club, and at that point he also wants to kind of like give up, in a similar way that Arjuna, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he had lost all composure and didn't want to fight. So in a similar way, it's kind of like ironic that in this case, in the battle with Lord Indra, we see that even this great personality, Vitrasura, is encouraging Arjuna, please, don't lose hope, don't lose faith. Pick up he had already cut off, I think, 2 of his arms or 2 of his heads, I forget. But even in that condition, Vitrasura is encouraging him, do your duty, pick up just pick it up, because of course, as the pastime goes, he needed to be killed by that particular weapon. So in this relation, we see that the super soul, as Krishna himself, is in the heart of all living entities. This particular verse, of course, is describing how the natural desire of all living entities is that he wants to protect his body at all means. In this material world, every living entity is very much addicted to his material body. And so this is the reason that we've been transmigrating lifetime after lifetime, being carried from one body to the next, the spirit soul being carried from one body to the next. And it seems like a vicious cycle, transmigrating through 8,400,000 species of life. And so our understanding from the Vedas, from the Bhagavad Gita, when the spirit soul is analyzed, that it is understood the soul is separate from the body, and this body is like an outer garment. And so the soul itself, when the body dies, as we'll see now in this case of Dadichi, wanting the demigods wanting his body, when the body dies, as the verses are pointing out, that the body is left behind, and it is the spirit soul that moves on. So of course, Dadichi Muni was a very, very advanced yogi, and so hence the request from the Supreme Personality of Godhead to obtain his bones, and thereby Vishvakarma can construct a thunderbolt weapon which would eventually be able to kill Vitrasura. There was no other hope. Otherwise, the demigods were just being defeated like anything. They had to flee in fear, in one sense. So, being very much attached to the body, the living entity is transmigrating from one body to the next. And I was thinking of chapter 7 in Bhagavad Gita. And so the description there is given, or the verse translation is, I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship the demigods, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to some particular deity. So in this regard, we can see, yes, the demigods, and of course, the living entity is very, very much attached to the body, and he's always looking to see how to gratify his senses. And so, of course, the first point of call is to worship the demigods for some material benefit. So the living entity is very, very much attached to that. Then related to that, I wanted to give one example, of Srila Prabhupada, just to put things in a little perspective, how this, desire of the living entity manifests in our lives, that we need to reflect on and, see what is in the core of our heart, what is our real desire. And of course, superficially, we see that, the living entity is just chasing after lusty material desires. But of course, that is not the goal of life. So in one particular morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, of course, only the very most senior disciples, would accompany him on these morning walks. And there was one particular devotee who, and of course, the devotees would ask, different questions to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, give appropriate answers for all of their questions. And there was one devotee that just didn't ask any questions throughout the entire walk. And so as Prabhupada, as he would, always do during his morning walks, at the end of the morning walk, he would get into the car and, head back to the temple. And so he gets into the car, and just before the door is about to close, this devotee quickly rushes forth and puts himself between the door and Srila Prabhupada. And then, with great humility, he's asking Srila Prabhupada, I have one question. And so Prabhupada said, yes. And so, of course, he explains to Prabhupada that, what should we be, thinking about to become more Krishna conscious? And Prabhupada, of course, he just gives one word. And, he doesn't give a sutra, he doesn't give a verse, he just gives one word. And what is that word? He says, desire. And of course, then the devotee moves out and Prabhupada heads off. And so, this is Acharya. This is, great personality who, can just give one word to be applicable for, many, many generations to come. And so, we all need to understand what is our desire. And, can understand from the Bhagavad Gita that is this desire of the living entity that is creating so much of karma for us, that is keeping us bound up in this material world. So as devotees, we are, of course, aspiring to desire to please the senses of Krishna. Because, we've been trying for many, many lifetimes of just pleasing our own senses. And all that does is it keeps us bound up in this material world. So we want to associate, hear about Krishna, hear the pastimes of Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, so that we can uncover our original spiritual identity, which has become covered due to transmigration through so many different lifetimes, in different bodies, undergoing so many different experiences. So all of these coverings are, covered over our heart, so that the core of our heart cannot be accessed, it seems. But by the gradual process of chanting Hare Krishna, associating with devotees, we can gradually shed these layers and uncover our original identity of spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. Although we are very, very minute. So we can see that, as far as desire is concerned from this Bhagavad Gita verse that Krishna is saying, he gives the living entity, well, in the purport, Prabhupada says it very, very nicely. Purport to 721, God has given independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facility to such persons. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence. And so, one may ask the question that, why does Krishna facilitate these desires? But we as living entities understand that we have free will. And if there is free will, then Krishna leaves us, to do as we desire. And so because we are desiring to enjoy the material world, enjoy the material body, Krishna gives facility. And so one of the ways, of course, is worshipping the demigods to get some material benefit. And we see, so many people in society today are engaged in worship of the demigods. And, particularly for myself, I was also demigod worshipper, very, very big demigod worshipper. So we used to worship, of course, Hanuman, and we used to worship Lord Shiva. So, of course, after I met the devotees, then, the devotees began to preach to me. Of course, I knew about Krishna. I knew he was a naughty boy, and, so many different pastimes I was familiar with. But the missing link was, how all of these pieces fitted together, who's who in the spiritual world, and how, even the material world, and how did, things work. So I remember also, and I think many people can relate to that, growing up as a Hindu particularly, you have some understanding, but the understanding is not complete. And so my biggest fear was that, giving up the worship of the demigods, that, what if I get some severe reaction? What if Hanuman gets really upset that I stop worshiping him? And I was also a little familiar because I had heard it a long time ago, the pastime of Lord Indra, and how he had, gotten upset with the residents of Vrindavan. So I was very, very afraid that, getting some reaction from Lord Shiva and Hanuman, and I didn't want to deal with it. Still, there was something drawing towards, going to the temple and chanting Hare Krishna. And so in this way, I was very, very fortunate that somehow, by the devotees, great mercy, of course. The temple was, 1 mile from where I lived. So I'd, been to the temple probably once only, just never had been there. So this was after I had started working as an engineer. And so then I went one day to look for a priest, a bona fide priest, to do Hanuman Puja and Shiva Puja. So this was my quest, going to look for a priest. And so somehow the other Parijata had met, we were having a long distance relationship, and somehow the other Parijata had met the devotees on the street a few days prior. And they had given her a book and invited her to the temple. And so she went to the temple and she heard, the devotees talk about Brahmins. So when I explained to her that, this is what my desire is, my mother wants, to do Hanuman Puja and Shiva Puja, but I'm looking for a bona fide priest. So in our communities, of course, there's many priests, but everybody knows that there's so many bogi yogis, in town. So it's common knowledge. So, everybody's always trying to figure out who's the most intelligent of all the bogi yogis. So I didn't want to get caught up in all of this. So I was asking everybody that I met. And so this is how, one day she told me, maybe you should go to the Hare Krishna temple and check, see if there's someone that can do this puja. So this is how I ended up at the temple, looking for a priest. And so I was always very, fearful, as I started, attending the programs at the temple, Sunday programs, and whenever I could, go and chant at the temple, I was always fearful. What if, some reaction? But I was, of course, trying to use my intelligence and play it cool, that if there's any sign whatsoever of some reaction coming, I'm just going to drop Krishna and, go back to my demigod worship. But the Supreme Lord was very, very merciful. He didn't give any signs of some, reaction coming from the demigods. And so, here I am today in Gita Nagari, somehow still struggling, but still trying to serve with some intensity the Supreme Personality of Godhead, according to, my understanding. And of course, the Shastra is there, the association of devotees are there. So still struggling in so many different ways, but trying to serve the devotees and serve Sri Radha Damodar and his cows. So as far as, this idea of desire is concerned, we as devotees, know there's so many examples given in the scripture of, so many persons who became misdirected. And I was thinking of the story of Ajmil, and how Ajmil, just by, witnessing, his father had sent him to go get fruits and flowers for puja. And so, grew up in a Brahmanical family. And on his way back, he had, just saw, in the street, drunken man and prostitute, embracing and kissing. And just, this thought, well, when he just saw them, just the sight of that, had triggered so many anarthas in his heart. And of course, we know the pastime of Ajmel, how he, became very, very much bewildered, after seeing that, act of, the association of this prostitute with, a man that, he was constantly thinking about this incident. So much so that he eventually invited this prostitute as a servant in his house. And of course, we know the story. Eventually, he took up residence with this prostitute and gave up his wife, his beautiful wife he gave up because of this anartha of being attracted to this prostitute. So we see in the case of Ajmil, of course, it kind of like had a happy ending. Of course, so much of trials and tribulations was there. He had 10 sons with the prostitute. And of course, we know the pastime that eventually calling out for Narayan, one of his youngest son, he invoked the mercy of the Supreme Lord just by calling out the name Narayan. So we understand that the names of God are so powerful that just by calling out the names of God, one can exit the cycle of birth and death. And so we see in the case of Ajmil, of course, after he came to his senses, after having seen the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, he had come to his senses and he immediately left for Haridwar. And there he performed, so much of austerity and eventually gave up his body and was taken back by the Vishnudutas back to the spiritual world. Then the other example I was thinking about was, where did I write it? We see the other example of Subari Muni, great sage performing so much of austerities underwater. So, so much austerities he was able to perform. But just again, by the sight of seeing two fish, mating, his meditation was broken and he became attached. And so, all of these anarthas, started to surface. So we know also that pastime, how he had married so many ladies. But again, just this deep-seated anarthas that's, buried in the core of our heart, sometimes is very, very difficult for us to shed. And so this is why the association of devotees is very, very important, so that gradually, by performing devotional service, we understand that the process in this age of Kali Yuga is chanting the holy names of the Lord and engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. And so in this way, we can shed all of these anarthas, become attached again to pleasing the senses of Krishna. So this is the goal. We understand Anya Bilasita Sunyam Jnana Karmadi Anuvritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Bhakti Silanam Uttama. Yeah, I always get it confused with Shate. That, we want to, pure devotional service is, free of any tinge of material desire. And, we need to worship Krishna favorably. So, unlike the example of Kamsa, he was also thinking of Krishna. So it's not just enough to think of Krishna, because Kamsa was always thinking of how to kill Krishna. So yes, some benefit might be there of thinking of Krishna, but still, ultimately we want to, pure devotional service is to think of Krishna favorably. And so this is, our, should be our desire. So we see in the case of Indra and the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has appeared and explained to them that, this is what needs to be done. So we see that even in the case of the demigods, when they are in distress, they also end up approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so in this way, we should, take example even from these, empowered personalities, that, when we're in distress, there's no sense going to some demigod to get some help. Why not, just go to the source? So the example is given that, when one eats, food to nourish the body, then the entire body gets nourished. It's not that, we have to feed the hands and the legs all separately. Just by eating food through the stomach, the entire body gets nourished. What other points did I have? Yeah, I think that's all the points I had as far as desire is concerned. As long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material field, he enjoys the senses. And while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul, lifetime after lifetime, with no end in sight. So it is by the mercy of devotees that we come into contact with, that due to their mercy, we're able to get the seed of bhakti, and this is what we want to try to cultivate. The seed of bhakti, bhakti lata bij, so that we can gradually purify ourselves to become eligible to go back home, back to God, back to the spiritual world. So we have an opportunity in this lifetime. We should not waste, this inconceivable opportunity, so to speak, and take full advantage of the association of devotees, and gradually purify ourselves to go back home, back to Godhead. Any comments, questions about all our desires and how to desire appropriately?
If we are associated with become light.
Hmm?
If we are associated with become light.
Yeah.
We are associated with great devotees, and some chance to become better devotees.
Yes.
I have a question.
Mhm.
At the very beginning, you mentioned the scenario of this situation, that on the end of Satya Yuga and the very beginning of Treta Yuga, the situation took place, the biggest fight between demigods and asuras. I'm just wondering, because we have also information that in Satya Yuga there is no, atheism, and we know that demon means atheistic and this person. So how is it so that the demigods, they face big problem with demons? How is it so that in Satya Yuga there were some demons? How you can explain this?
That's beyond my pay grade. We discussed that at some point. I don't know if we got to the bottom of it. Maybe devotees online want to share. So Surapal Prabhu's question is that in Satya Yuga, there was no atheism. How to reconcile that, these demons were fighting at the end of Satya Yuga. This great fight took place at the end of Satya Yuga, and why are they demons? I mean, one thing that I did mention previously was that I was also a little surprised. Generally, when we think of demons, we think of lower planetary system, and the Patal Loka, and all of these lower planets. But actually, the demons are living in the heavenly planets too. And so I think somehow there might be some connection, but I don't know the exact answer to your question. Anybody online has some insight? Satya Yuga, because of course, demons mainly mean atheistic, although there is so many great examples of devotees being born in the family of demons. In this case, even, we understand Chitraketu took birth as Vitrasura, and that's why he was very anxious, to go back home, back to Godhead. So Vitrasura, we see that, he was doing his duty, fighting according to, why he was, had, taken this birth in this demon body. But still, he was, a great devotee and very anxious because he was cursed, to take this birth. Anybody has any thoughts? Scholars online?
I could offer a few words. The demons often are Shaivites. They are worshippers of Lord Shiva, who is he is Krishna, but he's not Krishna. He is he's a guna avatar. Sometimes there are demons who are impersonalists. Their practice is to meditate on Brahman. The historically, demons have not been just some terribly degraded individuals and complete and utter atheists. Their thing is that they are opposed to Lord Vishnu. But apart from that, they still are civilized and adhere to all kinds of religious principles. They just don't like Lord Vishnu. They are geographically isolated from the Suras, the demigods. They have their own planets and situations within different planets, but also heavenly situations. The lower planetary systems, not hellish, heavenly, subterranean, heavenly planets are occupied by demons. What else can be said? Not a lot else coming to my mind at the moment. I had something, but it slipped away. So anyway, that's what I've got. I'm not sure I understood the question accurately, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think we got it.
Hare Krishna.
On the demons. So as far as desire is concerned, we see so many examples are there. Srila Prabhupada's, desire was to please his spiritual master. And, as a result, we see Srila Prabhupada at a very advanced age, came to the West for all of our benefit, with 40 rupees, no money, somehow or the other, on the cargo ship, 31 days, heart attacks, so much of trials and tribulations for Srila Prabhupada, just to please the order of his spiritual master. And that's what, his desire was. Still the living entity, like we discussed, has free will. We can decide, how to do it. Like Srila Prabhupada even, he wanted to spread Krishna consciousness as a rich man. That was his plan, his initial plan. But by making himself just as an instrument, what Prabhupada said, make me a puppet, I'm a puppet in your hands. But because of his surrender, he was open to, however it happened. And so we can see that, even though Prabhupada came to the West with no money, still, in a very short space of time, so many temples had become established. And, now we can see so many persons around the world are benefiting from the association of devotees, association of ISKCON. So many people are benefiting. So
There's a hand up.
Okay, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for great class, of course. This is Jambavati calling. And I was just reminded, coming from a Christian background, that one of the things that the pastor used to always say is that, evil lives among us. And the best way to be a disruptor is to do it from within, And then I'm also reminded of what Ratnath Maharaj says is that, we both have the good dog and the bad dog within us, and it just depends on which one we feed. That's all I wanted to add, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you for class.
Thank you so much. Yes, nice meditation. Which dog shall we feed? So, of course, ultimately, we just don't want to do good in the world. We want to get onto the spiritual platform, because doing good and doing bad, will also result in another body. We want to get onto the spiritual platform and do our duty, because we see the example is given of Arjuna, that Arjuna, he gave so many nice reasons to Krishna why he should not fight in the battlefield. And so those made logical sense, that if I fight, I'm going to kill all the soldiers, so many women are going to be without a husband for protection. So many powerful reasons that logically makes sense. But we see that Krishna one by one started to defeat every one of those reasons that Arjuna was giving of why he should not fight, because his plan was just to go meditate in the forest. And it seems like even the demigods here in this case, they had tried everything in their power to beat the demons, but still they were just losing hopelessly. And eventually they sought the help of, presented themselves to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now we can understand in perspective why Queen Kunti prays, that I want to remember you, and it seems like I generally, and it's applicable to all of us, we generally only seem to remember the Supreme Lord when there's some calamity. Something's not going according to our plan, then we immediately, go looking for Krishna. But no, we want to train the mind that, this is not the only time one needs to go. And so, of course, none of us want to be in a situation of praying like Queen Kunti, bring on the calamities, because, in this way I can always remember you. So we are not so brave, unfortunately, to pray like Queen Kunti. So let's be easy on ourselves and take the advice of Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and take advantage of the association of devotees, and follow the order of our spiritual master, chant Hare Krishna, and go back home, back to Godhead. Jai. Just seeing if there was any last notes that I had made here. Okay, thank you, devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Go Brahmanande, Hari Hari Bol.